We picked the topic of curiosity because the teachings of Wan Buddhism encourage questioning, inquiry, and learning. An open-minded curiosity is an avenue towards this aspect of the practice. Curiosity is such a natural phenomenon for humans, at least when we're young. Our 3 granddaughters explore their worlds with much glee. We have watched their changing approach to those colored plastic blocks that their parents keep stepping on. As infants, it took a while for them to register that blocks were even there. As they gained some hand-eye control, their exploration became tactile, hand and mouth. Later still, the blocks became items to stack, knock over, and throw. And as 2-year-olds, they can now name the different shapes, colors, and how many they have. Pretty soon, they will probably get bored with them and say, "We want Legos." Of course, that progression is a good thing as they learn to manage themselves and live successfully within their worlds. But over time, there's also the risk that they'll lose their sense of wonder, as more things have a name, an intended use, and a relative value. It's a matter of balance, how quickly we lose the freedom of curiosity as our judging mind develops, and for most of us, our beginner's mind lapses.
In this Dharma talk, we'd like to share some thoughts about opening that part of us back up and why that's so important to the practice. Let's start with some of the fundamental teachings of Wan Buddhism. In the essential dharmas of daily practice, which we sometimes recite, one of the sentences is, "Let us turn reluctance to learn into readiness to learn well." But what does learn well mean? The scriptures say that it requires an open mind, a beginner's mind, a curious mind. The threefold study contains cultivating the spirit, inquiry into human affairs and universal principles, and mindful choice in action. Inquiry into human affairs and universal principles involves gaining knowledge of all things and principles, as well as uncovering our innate wisdom. Curiosity leads us to probe because we wonder versus engage in an academic exercise. It gives the search for meaning a whole different quality.
According to the scriptures, the 8 articles form, with the threefold study, the essential way of practice. We recite the 8 articles in the essential dharmas of daily practice. Let us replace unbelief, greed, laziness, and foolishness with belief, zeal, questioning, and dedication. The founding master, Sotaesan, defined questioning as wanting to discover and know what we do not know about human affairs and universal principles. It's wanting to explore and discover for its own sake, rather than having a prescribed outcome in mind or because we should be interested. The motivating force for this form of questioning is curiosity. Open-minded curiosity points us to the truth. So gaining knowledge and wisdom is described all through Wan Buddha's teachings. It is central. We believe that honing our curiosity in a mindful and open way can be a tool in that quest.
When we look at something new, it's so easy to shut down and allow our preconceptions and judgments to take over. It's often difficult to engage in curious questioning. People have different styles for shutting down. We can look at this as 2 opposite poles. Immediately reject or immediately embrace. Some would argue that that's a circle too. Curious questioning is somewhere in the middle. Some immediately reject something new. Yeah, right. You've heard that. Sometimes said it. Refusing to even consider it. I already know everything about that. Or oversimplifying complexity. Some give something new a starry-eyed embrace. We call that blind faith. Following false teachers or do-gooders who carry an agenda. How often are we somewhere in the middle, curious to look at something new without preconceptions or immediate judgment?
Here are some of our personal examples of rejecting blind faith and in the middle, curious questioning. An example of rejecting. I am showing my age, but I can remember when the first home computers came out. It's a Commodore 64. I immediately decided I wasn't interested because I'm so bad at math. My son helped me realize I had a totally false preconception about what computers could do and how they worked. My judging mind had immediately jumped to a false conclusion.
Here's another example of rejecting. A few years ago, I read and transcribed by hand the Red Book, the Scriptures, to deepen my practice. Many parts resonated with me, but I had a lot of difficulty with what I interpreted as its overall paternalistic and authoritarian tone, especially in the Confucian parts. Do this, don't do that. I found myself either gritting my teeth or drifting off with those parts.
Blind faith examples. To be truthful, both of us are too cynical to succumb a whole lot to blind faith. As we said, people have different styles and we're more the rejecting types. However, as a gardener, I did have to learn not to believe everything I read in garden catalogs. It was only through experience that I learned that vigorous means rampant weed and rare and choice means expensive. Here's a rather extreme example of blind faith in history. Sabbatai Zev, who lived in the 1600s, claimed he was the Jewish Messiah and attracted over 40,000 followers. They followed him from Eastern Europe all the way to Constantinople. The people of Constantinople were rather alarmed to have this huge group of people arrive, so the Grand Vizier jailed Sabbatai and told him he either had to convert to Islam or he would be killed. Without hesitation, Sabbatai quickly converted, leaving his 40,000 followers very confused.
And in the middle, curious questioning. Back to what I interpreted as the paternalistic and authoritarian tone of parts of the Red Book. More recently, I asked myself, what is it about me that I have such an emotional response to how parts of the Red Book are presented? Stepping back, I realized that here was another example of my childhood rebellion to authority that I was still carrying around with me at the age of 73. From there, I was able to settle down and think about the value contained in those passages, even though I would have written them differently.
Also curious questioning. I've always tended to read grace of parents broadly, as in teachers and other kinds of mentors in my life. But it was suggested that I take this more literally. This interpretation led me to a very different understanding, the importance of ancestors to my existence. What does it take to have what Reverend Ginger calls an open mind and a caring heart? Curious questioning takes you out of your own ego. How much do our beliefs, wants, and needs shape the answer, or even how we approach a question? That's ego, which is a pathway to attachments. Curious questioning stretches out our period of observation and helps us defer making judgments. It helps us remove our ego from the process. The founding master said, "Our minds should have no selfishness, nor be swayed and taken in by cravings and attachments, but instead should nourish the nature that is clear and round. A mind that sees clearly creates the conditions for an open heart.
And applying curiosity to questioning is not just an intellectual exercise. Buddhism teachings are full of paradoxes, things that can't be resolved directly in the mind. The great and the small, arising and ceasing, self and no self, death and no death, and so on. It's easy to view these as contradictions. It takes open-minded curiosity to begin to see them as something beyond words and speech. Last Sunday, at a meeting of some of the temple practitioners, we were discussing some of the paradoxes that are embedded in Buddhist thought. Hani, one of our practitioners, looked up and said, with an open mind, "I don't understand." Reverend Ginger wisely replied, "That means you do understand." So go back to the question you asked yourself at the start of the talk. Ask it again to yourself. Take a moment to do that. How much are your preconceptions, attachments, and ego wrapped up in your question, or how you ask the question? How much is it founded on curious questioning without preconception or judgment? Can cultivating your curiosity be a path to recreating your beginner's mind? Kamsahamnida.